let's move on and talk about some of my favourite people on earth.
Something a bit more light-hearted now.
The Scottish National Party. Political beggars, if you will. They really just hate the English, and it's so prominent in Scotland now. And Vicky, our website editor, has provided me with a great deal of content for this because she hates the Scottish National Party. Obviously, because she's Scottish, she likes Scotland, but hates what they're doing to the place. And it's become just overwhelmingly apparent to the Scottish themselves. Now, hang on a second. Oh, do we just hate the English? And they're all looking at each other going, well, I mean, that is on our placards. That is official state policy. I mean, that is what the dear leader is saying. I think it might just be deep-seated ethnic resentment that drives the entire thing forward.
I think you can see that from the very beginning.
Yes.
And it makes perfect sense. If you want to separate yourself from someone else, and you want people to go along with that, you've got to turn those other people into either the enemy or lesser than you or not deserving of you. That's the only way. You've got to put a wedge.
Yep.
That's the only way to do it.
The sort of proto-genocidal sentiments that the Rwandans would be, the Hutu, I think it was, broadcasting on their radios. The sort of anti-Semitic things you saw in Nazi or pre-Nazi Germany. Yes, it's genuinely something that the SNP have found. And again, if you're going to be an ethnic nationalist party, it's hard not to do that, I would suggest. But I thought we'd go through how the Scots are slowly dawning on themselves. Hang on, are we the baddies? Because that's actually what's kind of happening. But before we begin, if you want to support us and you are interested in something I was very proud of doing, I did a book club on Hannah Pitkin's The Concept of Representation. This, I think, is deeply important because Hannah Pitkin was a 20th century philosopher who was thinking, well, hang on a second. Everyone keeps saying, we want representation. The American Revolution, no taxation without representation. Everyone's constantly going on about, ethnic representation, gender representation. What do they even mean when they say representation? And so she had done a really comprehensive study on the concept of representation. And actually, it's a lot more complex and multi-layered than you'd think. And this is why when the left say, we want representation, and then someone like, Rishi Sunak, Swella Braverman, Priti Patel was a great example. We want a black woman or a woman of colour in charge. Okay, now Priti Patel's here to enforce the hardline conservative position. They're like, well, not like that. It's like, okay, but what did you really mean? You didn't really want representation in...
Thatcher.
Exactly.
They hate Thatcher.
She's not the first female prime minister. No. She's the first satanic prime minister, as far as they're concerned. But that's the point. What's being represented? And in fact, Rishi Sunak is a great example of this, right? Because Rishi Sunak, everyone's like, Rishi Sunak's a perfectly normal chap. And it's like, no, he's from a wealthy, he's from the imperial bureaucracy, the Indian imperial bureaucracy of the British Empire, lived in Southampton, got parachuted into North Yorkshire, where he doesn't really represent North Yorkshire. Also, he's married to the daughter of an Indian billionaire, and he himself is worth like £750 million. And now he is the representative MP for North Yorkshire, not the average North Yorkshireman, where the average salary is like £23,000 a year. And now he got after ousting Liz Truss, he's been installed, despite the fact that no one voted for him. So who does he represent? And if we look at the Indians, they're all saying, yay, the first Indian Prime Minister. Well, there we go. Because the point of representation is what is represented. Something that is absent is being presented again. And that's what they're seeing. And so it's like, right, okay, I as an Englishman, we as Englishmen, how represented, how present do you feel in the British government at the moment? Not very.
Hardly ever. Any of the policies, the new laws, I look at everything and go, I don't want that. Very rarely I see something I want, or I think would benefit me.
And that's why the concept of representation is important. So I expand on all of this throughout the book club. Definitely worth your time, because I've got to say, Hannah Pitkin's work is very, very thorough, but also very dry. Not terribly exciting to read. So hopefully I've made it digestible. I genuinely mean it. For your own benefit, you'll want to read. You want to watch this.
My only point on representation would be you have different groups, and those groups can be split into subgroups. That can be split into subgroups, and it basically goes down to the individual. And
Yes.
that's what we try to do in this country, the individual. That's why we all have one vote each.
Yep.
That's the only true way of representation.
Well, the issue isn't necessarily how you get the representative, because you can have representation without elections. For example, I feel quite represented by Elon Musk at the moment. I didn't vote for him, but he does represent my attitudes and sentiments when approaching the current environment that we operate in. You get someone like Larry Elder, who's a very conservative black man in California. I feel quite represented, actually, by his opinions. But descriptively, I'm not represented by them. But this is the thing. Pitkin does a great job.
Right.
I won't go too far into it. But it's an important subject that the left has been leveraging a lot over the years. And it's actually on our shoulders to have never really thought this through. And so it's worth actually thinking this through. So anyway, let's begin in 2015, when my favourite historian, David Starkey, got in trouble by saying, well, they are basically the Nazi Party for Scots, aren't they? And the Scottish National Party were like, oh, how could you, sir? You filthy Englishman. You filthy, disgusting, rat-like Englishman. How could you say that? And so he was like, you should apologise. And he was like, no. These are basically the Nazi Party for Scotland. And he said that they were strikingly similar. He said that the Scottish flag was like the swastika, and likened the SNP's view of the English to Adolf Hitler's hatred of Jewish people.
Yep.
Not wrong, actually, because I found a great evidence of this. In 2019, there's an Irish blogger called John Kelly who just wrote this, saying anti-English rhetoric among Scottish nationalist circles on a Medium blog was just... he says, this is a research piece into observed anti-English rhetoric among Scottish nationalists. Using a number of examples, I will show that ethnic prejudice does indeed exist within Scottish nationalism. What a shock. The reason for this study is due to the claimed notion that Scottish nationalism differs from other forms of nationalism, in the sense that it doesn't include nationalistic prejudice. It even comes in the face of Nicola Sturgeon having to condemn her own politician for anti-English rhetoric in 2016. I, the author myself, am from Ireland. I have no dog in this fight, and I am doing the study from an outsider's perspective. I'm not claiming every single Scottish nationalist is racially prejudiced against England. I'm simply pointing out that when it occurs, it isn't a one-off event and occurs with regularity. If an Irishman's like, "Ooh, you guys really seem to hate the English," then you've probably got something wrong with you. Like, you know, if it, like, because I imagine there's quite a lot of anti-English prejudice in Irish nationalist circles as well. So, you know, the average Irishman, not generally known for being biased in favour of England. But throughout this, if you just want to scroll down, you can see just the kind of... if you scroll down a bit further, so you see the actual comments. But basically, they're repeatedly referring to the English as being disgusting, dirty, and likening negative traits in themselves as having an English trait. As in, you know, you're deceptive or something like that, or that's an English trait. Well, that's exactly the same way that the Nazis referred to Jews. There was, Bo was telling me about a video that he had seen, a video clip. I think it was like Himmler or something, was being bothered by a fly, and he was like, this fly has a Jewish nature. And it's like, that's exactly what they're doing here. You know, it's like the calling negative traits English traits is just remarkable. But anyway, come April 2021, you had someone like Jill Stevenson, who was a former professor of modern German history at the University of Edinburgh, so a professor, saying, why is there so much hatred in Scotland? Why has my country become just a hateful cesspool? It's like, well, probably the same question that, you know, a professor in Weimar, Berlin was asking. Why are we such a hateful country all of a sudden? Well,
because their leaders are promoting it for their own political agenda.
Exactly.
And they feel it's beneficial now. But you can lose control of these things very easily.
Well, they are, actually. That's the thing. She says, I don't remember this as a factor in public discourse for most of the decades of my life. It's only since nationalism became a major force in Scotland from around 2011 that virulent and public hatred became so noticeable. Scottish nationalists spew venom about UK, London, Westminster, England, and above all, Tories. Of course, there are always animosities, which in the Scots have long harboured grievances against the English. But there has been the kind of smaller country resentment sort of that Portugal has with Spain and things like that. But such Scots express their resentment as a form of inferiority complex, claiming without the slightest... Still got a sore throat. claiming without the slightest justification some kind of moral superiority. Certainly the volume of hatred, abuse and insults levelled at the UK, London, Westminster, England and above all Tories is an indication of moral turpitude rather than moral rectitude. Hardly the right thing to do, is it?
I look at people of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland not as my cousins, but as my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
I see us all as one family, close family. So that's why I don't even call them my cousins, because they're not cousins. They're my brothers and sisters. I don't see any real difference between us. I see us as one people.
I think there's a very deep strain of thought in the English psyche that views the Scots, the Welsh and the Irish as basically we've been here for such a long time. There's no particular, the differences are kind of cosmetic at this point. That's how the English view it. But the thing is, I think that in a lot of the Celtic nations, they actually view it differently to that. I mean, this is what we're seeing. But she's got a great ending passage on this one, right? The SNP Scotland has the feel of the last days of the Roman Empire. The rot has set in some time ago, but now the wild delusions being expressed by separatists, and especially their formerly sure-footed leader, suggest that its days are numbered. I'm not suggesting that it is imminent, but the glory days are past, and the impression is of never glad, confident morning again. Good point. And when a regime is failing, what do? You find an enemy and say it's their fault that we're failing.
Yep.
Would be brilliant if it wasn't for those pesky English.
Yeah.
So the former deputy leader of the SNP, James Silas, in August 2021, had to come out into the Times and say, look, this is all fueled by a hatred of the English. He accused the SNP of manufacturing grudges and grievances against Westminster that fuels anti-Englishness and antagonises unionists. Which, of course, if you're an independence voter, you're a separatist in Scotland, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
He says, I don't think we should exaggerate the undertone of anti-Englishness that exists in Scotland, but there is, and the grudge and grievance tactic of the SNP leadership keeps it alive. Moving on then, in September 2021, it was very much obvious that she was the one keeping this alive by one commentator in the Scotsman, and in fact it was the rot coming from the head, very much like when, and again I hate to use David Starkey's comparison to the Nazis, but if Adolf Hitler is constantly using his podium to bang on about the Jews, well, there's probably going to be quite a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment around, isn't there? But yeah, he says it's in her power to lower the temperature, to condemn anti-English bile in her party or beyond, and she could start this week, but of course she doesn't, because the rot begins from the head.
And there's no benefit for her to do that.
Yeah, exactly. The only benefit comes from saying the English are evil and the source of all your problems. If only we could get rid of them.
Exactly.
Vote for me.
No.
I'll pass the Enabling Act.
Yeah.
Says Nicola Sturgeon. Anyway, so in March 2022, this was getting so bad that one Scottish council was like, yeah, we're against phobias. Evil things, phobias, being racist towards people is easy. We've done a little look into Islamophobia. Actually, in Scotland, there's not much of it. We've had a lot of Anglophobia. Yeah. A lot of it. I used to date a woman from Liverpool, and she was like, oh yeah, I lived in Scotland, and people were always racist to me for being English. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Are Liverpudlians English? I thought they were Scouse. They're from Ireland. So
you're south of the wall.
Yeah,
we don't care how far south of the wall.
That's exactly right, actually. In fact, I'll get that, because there are a bunch of Scots who are conservative Scots who are being racially abused for being English. They're like, I'm not English. It's like, yeah, but you're a Tory. Yeah, but that doesn't make me English. You know? So anyway, this Moray Council of North East Scotland made the decision to pay special attention to Anglophobia in their district because of their plans to root out discrimination and harassment. The move came after the council adopted the widely used definition of Islamophobia used by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims. This definition, just to say, was nonsense. Is a form of racism that was rooted in racism and had racial expressions or something. And it's just like, what does that mean? That's not... Anyway, but apparently now it can be applied to Anglophobia. So now that I'm part of a victim group, I'm in favour of it now. I'm joking, obviously. But the one councillor said, I think we need to recognise, along with Islamophobia, Anglophobia is a real problem. As a minority group in Moray, I get more emails and telephone calls from people who suffered from Anglophobia, and I'd like to drag that up. Anglophobia is there all the time. Numerous constituents over the last 5 years have come to me asking what we're going to do about this. Another councillor supported the appeal and said, even as a Scotsman, he'd been the victim of anti-English abuse. What?
That's obviously because he's not got an accent.
Maybe he does. Maybe
so we presume you're of English.
I think he's just a conservative, and so the fact that he's wearing the rose out, they're like, right, you're English. Yeah. We hate you.
Or you're an English stooge.
Yes.
For being a Tory.
Yeah, exactly. You're being paid by the Jews.
Yeah.
Being paid by the Anglos. Anyway, in March 2020, this was just being swept under the rug, according to Public, who are writing into the Scottish Daily Express. One Scot said, it's been here forever. It's just the SNP and the Independence campaign have really brought it to the fore. They and their supporters hate Scottish unionists as much as English people, because it's exactly as you say. They're just traitors. They're race traitors to the English and the Union. That year, early in this year, MP Jamie Halcrow had written to the First Minister asking her to condemn the anti-English hate-filled garbage that was shared by an SNP branch that had been leaked out of this SNP branch. And Sturgeon was told that her failure to publicly stand against it was her condoning overt anti-English hate speech. The last time she had actually condemned anti-English hate speech was in 2019, where she spoke about it at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, because there was a man holding a photo on the march with a placard that said, England, get out of Scotland. It's like, the dual monarchy was a Scottish monarchy. James I was a Scottish monarch. Well, you came to us because you were bankrupt, dickheads. Go start the Downing scheme. No, I'm not going to start. Anyway, she said, "Oh well, that kind of sentiment has no place in Scotland." It's like, really, very convincing. In August, she was accused of whipping up anti-English hatred, if you can believe it. Sturgeon herself was accused of whipping up anti-English hatred after a BBC journalist was called a traitor, and Tory activists were pelted with eggs at the party's leadership hustings in Perth.
You couldn't do this to any other group.
Nope.
No other group in the world could you do this in the UK to.
Possibly white Americans. Oh, in the UK? Well,
yeah.
Oh, no, not in the UK. God.
Yeah. No other group.
God, can you even imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it was Tommy Robinson and his lads?
Yeah.
Going to a mosque or something and pelting with eggs? Jesus.
Or even holding signs saying, Islam has no place in the UK.
Yeah. Muslims out of England.
Stuff
like that. God. I mean, that would literally
jail
be a hate
time.
crime. Yeah.
You would do jail time for that.
And then you'd be getting the rough end of the stick in the jail as well.
Yeah.
Like that.
Do you know what we need to send to Scotland? We need to send to Scotland the
bill.
That organisation, I forget the name of it now, that looked at the Labour Party and said that they were racist. First time a political party.
Oh yes, yeah.
We need to send that organisation up there to have a look at the SNP.
Have a look. We've got all the evidence.
Yeah.
Right, so, yeah, this was again Holly Mosscrop, typical English name, Mosscrop, right? Was attacked because she's English or an English sympathiser. I don't know. But the protesters realised we were Tories and went crazy. They were screaming at us, calling me a Tory whore, Tory filth. Again, you could just replace Tory with English or Jewish. It was nasty. Someone grabbed my coat and tugged at it, leaning over the barrier, screaming right in my face. Like, this is wild hysteria that the SNP are unleashing here, right? And one senior Scottish Tory member of the Scottish Parliament said that Sturgeon was attempting to inflame her base by suggesting Scotland was downtrodden and contributed to the angry scenes. She's doing everything to inflame her base simply because, let's be honest, they're not delivering. So they're whipping up their base, they're whipping up anger and hatred. Look, it's racist. They hate the English. It's the definition of racism. And and like we've seen from the other ones, being like, Tory, ooh, as in the evil Tories who now represent the English in the Scottish mind. Well, they're all English sympathisers. They're all traitors to the SNP's glorious, pure racial cause.
Yep.
Bloody awful. Jim Silas had to come out again this year and accuse Sturgeon again of being anti-English, but we'll carry on. And so the SNP were like, we need to do something about this. Right? We need to do something about this. Everyone's accurately pointing out that we obviously hate the English because those bloody English keep pointing that out for them.
Yeah.
And so they put out a new code of conduct. The code of conduct wasn't don't be a racist. It was don't tell everyone that you're a racist.
Mm.
Problem solved. You may hate the English, but don't say so. Scottish independence supporters have been told. Right. Good to know. I just think that's amazing. I just find that so funny.
Cured racism overnight.
Yeah. Imagine the BNP about our thing. You can be a racist, but just don't say that you're a racist. It's just remarkable. It called for signatories to engage with those who are yet convinced of the positive case for Scottish independence, politely and positively, without rancour and bitterness. I refer you back to the way that they were treating the Scottish Conservatives only a month before.
I think she's worried. I think the reason why she won't have a go at these people who are doing this, I think she's probably afraid of a split in the SNP.
They're her core supporters.
And then you get the hardcore leaving the SNP, which are the ones who do all the leafleting and all the work, and you're left with the middle class SNP who don't really want to do anything.
Yep.
And she's trying to hold a coalition together. Yep.
No, you're exactly right. The hardcore, deeply Anglophobic supporters are the ones who are going to be. It's like Jeremy Corbyn with Momentum, right? It's like these are a bunch of thugs who want to be violent are only being held in check by the laws that we have. Were these alleviated, these would be the people who would be purging their political opposition, and they're the ones who are going to be closest to her. And you are exactly right. The sort of you're going to have sympathisers who are the sort of middle class people who maybe they give £5 a month or whatever the thing is, but they're not going to do anything. These are the people who actually do anything. So she can't really just come out and be like, "You're bad people."
I just popped in my head. So not all SNP supporters are racist, but all racists are SNP supporters.
Well, in Scotland, yeah, probably, yeah. But anyway, so you get more public opinion coming into the newspapers, which I think fascinating. Just looking through these letters, the SNP is so politically antagonistic to England that it already governs as if Scotland has seceded from the United Kingdom. Imagine, if you will, if the Tory or England was replaced by a racial epithet, the furor would be deafening. To a minority in Scotland, Tory English and Westminster is an oppressive Anglo hydra, and because of this, they are fair game. Sometimes it's not difficult to see the obvious sentiment behind such incidents. You don't really belong here. Again, if Tommy Robinson or anyone like that was saying anything of the sort, hell to pay, and you may remember that Nicola Sturgeon was trying to make it so that people from England couldn't travel to Scotland during the COVID lockdowns. She was also being like, "Oh, don't go to England, don't go to England." It's like, it's because of COVID. Yeah, that's the reason. Yeah. Apparently, in Matt Hancock's book, he said, in response to our Tier 4 announcement, Sturgeon announced a travel ban with the rest of the UK. I'm sure she's been yearning to do that for all of her life. I bet she has. I mean, I don't want to give Matt Hancock any bloody props, but she probably has. Anyway, so it was, and the thing that sparked off this entire segment, right, was because Jeremy Clarkson wrote his vile and hateful tirade against Meghan Markle in The Sun the other day, and this has really kicked off a giant firestorm. Now, Nick Dixon is going to be on tomorrow to discuss it, and he was like, "Don't cover it." It's like, I won't cover it. But I had to kind of cover it a little bit, so I won't go into it. But basically, Jeremy Clarkson hates Meghan Markle. He was like, "I really dislike Meghan Markle in The Sun." And everyone's like, "You can't say that." And The Sun were like, "Good point, we'll take it down." But this got a very big endorsement for Jeremy Clarkson from a very, very pro-Scottish Nationalist Party newspaper.
What?
Now, I say big endorsement. For them, it was a massive condemnation. But after reading it, I was like, oh, yeah, I knew I liked Jeremy Clarkson for a reason. They say that... the Wee Ginger Doug, who's the author of this piece, if you scroll down just a little bit, John, so you can see it. Wee Ginger Doug says, Jeremy Clarkson has a long history of making grossly offensive comments and of behaving like a petulant man-child. Good input, Wee Ginger Doug. Wouldn't want anyone behaving childishly, would we? Wee Ginger Doug. But he goes through in a bunch of, lists Jeremy Clarkson's crimes against progressive nationalism and says, what all of these comments have in common as they betoken a man steeped in right-wing English nationalist exceptionalism, who believes that the only real offensiveness is whatever happens to mildly inconvenience him personally, or which challenges the privilege of middle-class white heterosexual English men like him. Resounding endorsement. I hope he runs for Parliament. But again, you can feel the venom in the word English when he writes it like that, right?
Yeah.
You know, you say white heterosexual men and there was enough venom in that, but no, now we've got the English in there.
And we're also using the words now of the woke as well.
Oh, yes.
You know, has to be a heterosexual Englishman. Not just a white Englishman. You've also got to be heterosexual.
Yeah. And middle class.
Yep. And gammon.
And a nationalist. Apparently that's bad, says the SNP's personal paper.
Yeah.
The National. The paper is literally called The National. And it's like, oh, but it's your nationalism that we don't like. Yeah. So that was all remarkable and I found hilarious. But the crowning cherry on the cake for me was when Nicola Sturgeon herself came out and was like, he's distorted by hate, you know. It's like, oh, really, Nicola? Oh, really? The phenomenal irony of you saying that is not lost on me or anyone else, I presume. And I don't really think that anything Jeremy Clarkson said was terribly wrong. He doesn't like Meghan Markle. He doesn't have to.
And his description was basically a scene from
Game of Thrones. Yes.
Yep.
And now he's raised it. I can think of a few people who should probably be flogged through the streets.
Yeah. With people shouting shame.
Yeah. Grooming gang members, for example. Before they go to prison, maybe they should be stripped naked, flogged through the streets, have excrement thrown at them, and then they get taken off to jail.
And do you remember when Joe Brandt made that poor joke about milkshaking Nigel Farage with battery acid?
Yeah.
It was a joke. I don't find it funny, and it wasn't even funny, but I knew it was a joke.
But even if it's not necessarily a joke, she's allowed to express her feelings on things, right? You know, because I mean,
it would be incitement if she meant it, but it was a joke.
If she'd said someone should do this, then fair enough. But if, as Jeremy Clark said, you know, I wish that would happen. Yeah, it's not the same thing. Yeah, you know. Yeah. So you know, like a person should be able to express feelings, even if they're negative feelings.
Yeah,
I think
because we all do.
But yeah. Anyway, she ends with this, and this is just the best bit, right? I think that possibly it gives an insight into Jeremy Clarkson and the kind of person he is. So maybe he just needs to take a step back from things and just think about life a little bit more. Oh, really, Nicola?
If only she could take her own advice.
Yeah, exactly. It's just someone distorted by hate. Thanks for that, Nicola. Yeah.